The Carolina Panthers have been a very fun story to keep track of this year. They didn't start out on the strongest of terms. In fact, they started out 0-2. They lost convincingly to the Jacksonville Jaguars week 1, and then they lost a close game to the Cardinals. But then, against the Falcons, something clicked. Something turned on. But it was quickly squashed against the Patriots the following week. But as the season went on, one thing became clear. This wasn't the same old Panthers. Yes, they took their lumps earlier in the season, but this team looks really good. Like, you maybe don't want to play them in the playoffs good. They may not be the number 1 seed, the 2 seed, the 3 seed, the teams that you're shaking in your boots to play. But they're a scrappy underdog that will come and sock you in the mouth and try and beat you, take you down, and just go all out. And the Carolina Panthers can maybe do that this year if they win their division. So before the battle for the NFC South takes place, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers and the job Dave Canales did to rebuild this organization. 2018 was the start of the Dave Tepper era in Carolina. Now, they got out to a great start, going 6-2 in their first 8 games. But unfortunately, they'd fall off down the stretch, losing 7 in a row after starting 6-2 and only winning their last game of the season against New Orleans Saints. Now, Cam Newton did struggle with a nagging shoulder injury during that losing streak, but still not a good end to the season after such a promising start that maybe had playoff implications. But that was just the case. The Carolina Panthers were maybe on the decline at that moment, and we just didn't know it yet. But that 6-2 start was the last great era of Cam Newton football in Carolina. Then we go to the 2019 season, in which we saw the emergence of Christian McCaffrey, truly becoming one of the best players in the game of football. But there was a problem during the season. Cam Newton wasn't healthy. He only played in 2 games all season long, dealing with injuries, and it was noticeable. The Carolina Panthers went 5-11. That's not a good record. And in fact, it led to the firing of Ron Rivera, the guy who brought them to a Super Bowl and was overall a phenomenal coach during his tenure at Carolina. But the Panthers needed to go a new direction. But unfortunately, this would become a trend with Dave Tepper. It all starts here in the 2019 season with the firing of Ron Rivera. Not saying he deserved to be fired or not. This is not one of these types of videos. This is me looking at where a certain trend started that Dave Tepper couldn't stop. As we enter the 2020s, we enter a new era in Carolina, the Matt Rhule era. Now, Panthers fans, I understand. Please do not throw tomatoes at me. I know how awful this era was in Carolina. But as we look at it, there were clear and obvious reasons as to why. Because the first season of Matt Rhule era in Carolina, their starting quarterbacks were Teddy Bridgewater, who was fine, Will Grier, Tommy Stevens, and P.J. Walker. Now, Tommy Stevens didn't play down football, but he was on their final roster. But we really look at Teddy Bridgewater here being the starting quarterback through the majority of the time at Carolina. Side note, he's currently on the Bucs and has a chance to see his team win the division over the Carolina Panthers. Just wanted to bring that up a quick little second. But we look at how he played. In 15 games with Carolina, he passed for 3,700 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. And how much money did the Panthers pay him? Does anyone remember letting anyone raise their hand? Nope, no one. Well, it was a grand total of $63 million over 3 years. Would you be surprised to find out the general manager was fired during the season? A very bad season that saw the Panthers go 5-11 again and would continue a trend. 2021 Carolina Panthers were a very fascinating watch because I was still very hopeful that Sam Darnold would turn his career around. Now, this is me saying this with what happened and me not thinking he would do it in Seattle, but at this point in time, I was still a Sam Darnold believer. And they started out 3-0, and I remember thinking, this team's going to be awesome. They're going to make the playoffs. I'm going to be right about Sam Darnold. And then they would proceed to lose their next 4 games. And there were a lot of flaws shown. Now, to be fair, 3 of those games they lost were 1-score games. They weren't getting blown out until the Giants, of all teams, they got blown out by. But we look at the Panthers. A season that started out 3-0 and fun turned to disaster, as Sam Darnold had a negative touchdown-interception ratio, and they ended up bringing back Cam Newton when he got hurt. Cam Newton had a fun game against the Cardinals in which they blew them out, and then proceeded to show why Cam Newton was available at that time. He didn't have the same juice he once did. But we look at this Panthers team. They had some talent. They had CMC, who, albeit, has always battled injuries, but Brian Burns, Stephon Gilmore, they weren't talent deprived. They just had some issues. And these are the same issues we'd see pop up next season as well. If you thought the 2021 quarterback room was weird, well, wait till I tell you the 2022 quarterback room featured Baker Mayfield instead of Cam Newton, as right before the season on July 6th, the Panthers traded a 5th-round pick to get Baker Mayfield. And at the time, a lot of people thought, well, this will be interesting. You know what? It was very, very interesting, as Baker Mayfield did not really have a great season with the Panthers. In fact, it was so bad, he didn't finish the season as a Carolina Panther. He started 6 games, went 1-5, passed for a little over 1,300 yards, and had 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Then he was replaced by slinging Sammy Darnold. And this is where we see a little bit of that Sam Darnold we see today come out. And this all happened after Matt Rhule was fired. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Matt Rhule was fired on October 10th after starting out the season 1-4. Interim head coach Steve Wilks would take his spot. Now, they didn't get out to the best start as they lost to the Rams. Then they beat the Bucks, lost to the Falcons in close one in overtime, lost to the Bengals, beat the Falcons, lost a tough game against the Ravens, beat the Broncos, beat the Seahawks, lost to the Steelers, beat the Lions, lost to the Bucks, and beat the Saints. The reason why I really want to hamper on that loss to the Bucks, they nearly won the division because the Buccaneers were struggling that year. Steve Wilks guided the ship with Sam Darnold as quarterback and nearly took them to the playoffs. So you got to be asking yourself, as a owner, what do? Do you keep the guy or do you go a different direction? I mean, he did coach some of the best stretch of Panthers football we've seen in a while, since the 6-2 start by Ron Rivera before they lost 7 in a row. What should we do? Oh, we should go a different direction. Now, I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a second, but really looking at this season, there was hope for Carolina. I remember watching this season thinking at the time, this Panthers team's got something. They have some studs. Brian Burns is awesome. J.C. Horn is awesome. I like their running back room outside of Christian McCaffrey. I was a big Chuba Hubbard fan. I think Ika Mekwonu looked amazing his rookie year. Some of the receivers, yeah, that could use improvement. DJ Moore, he's fine. Terrence Marshall, oof, I still had such high hopes for him. There were so many members on this Panthers team I was so excited to see develop. And it just never was, unfortunately, as we'll get to in a second. But this Panthers team, I think, signaled hope. And it's really weird with what we saw the following year, and why I do think at the time it was a mistake to move off Steve Wilks. The start of the Frank Reich era. As we look at the Carolina Panthers, they did a lot in the offseason, as they trade up for the number 1 overall pick to select Bryce Young. And then they took Jonathan Mingo, another guy I was really high on. But I loved Bryce Young coming out of college. I really liked his anticipation. I thought he threw really good. I thought he was really accurate. There was, of course, concerns about his height and how that would hold up in the NFL, if he would be able to take abuse from all these big guys hitting him. It was a concern. But I didn't really think he would struggle. I really liked Bryce. I thought he was very smart. I thought he was very intelligent. And I thought he could be a modern-day Drew Brees. But that didn't happen his rookie year, as the Panthers looked dreadful. As they start out the season 0-6 without their first overall pick next year because they traded for Bryce Young. And something else happened shortly into the season. After starting out the season 1-10, Frank Reich was fired. Oh wait, does that mean I have to take away the Frank Reich era sign? Hang on, give me a second. Now that's fixed, I think it's important we talk about Bryce Young, as he was dreadful his rookie year, as he didn't even hit 3,000 passing yards in 16 games, threw 11 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, had a completion percentage of 59.8, and his long completion was 48 yards. He also got sacked 62 times. Now, were there other factors with Bryce Young struggling? Absolutely. That offense line was dreadfully bad. One of the worst units I have ever seen play offense line in the NFL. It just had no hope of protecting Young, who we already had questions about how well would he hold up in the NFL. His offense line did him no favors his rookie year. Overall, it was disastrous first year with this new regime, with whatever you want to say, because Bryce Young struggled. You put all your eggs in that basket, and it looked like a rotten basket from start to finish. This offense line was horrible. Bryce Young was horrible, and you didn't have your first pick, and that ended up being the first overall pick in Caleb Williams, who at the time, everyone was calling a generational level prospect. It was bad on every which way. And it was all pointed at one man, David Tepper. As Tepper really became known as a laughingstock of an owner. We would see him in the stands arguing with fans, throwing drinks, just having a miserable time. And it was all justified by the fans to be upset because Dave Tepper kept on making mistake after mistake after mistake, in which he thought he was some genius. He truly wasn't. In order for the Panthers to be fixed, he had to look himself in the mirror and admit he needed to take a step back from football operations because there were other stuff that was struggling there. The practice facility that got started built but never got used. Why? Because the Panthers backed out of the deal, because David Tepper backed out of the deal. It was a disaster for the Panthers, and they need someone to come in to tell Dave Tepper when to bug off, when to leave this team alone. They need a man that had the courage to do so. Now, before we talk about Dave Canales as the Panthers head coach, I think it's important to talk about him as the offense coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that for the 2023 season, I thought was going to be dreadfully bad. I thought they'd be right down there with the Panthers, just in the bottom of the barrel because they lost Tom Brady, and this team was about to pay the Super Bowl tax of, hey, you won the Super Bowl, you have some aging players, I overall just don't think your team's going to be that great. But something different happened. The Buccaneers' offense exploded. Why? They brought in Dave Canales to be the offense coordinator, a coach who just dominated on the offense side of the ball. Now, if you're wondering where he came from before, he was originally the Seattle Seahawks passing game coordinator before that. In 2020 and 2021, he then went to the Bucs, helped them get to the postseason, and win a playoff game. Something that the Bucs didn't think was going to happen after Tom Brady retired, I'm sure. But we look at one thing that really jumped out to me. That was Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield had a renaissance in Tampa Bay his first year, producing the best numbers of his career at that point. He had 4,000 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. The same Baker Mayfield that struggled in Carolina just a year earlier. He looked new. He looked revitalized. He was having fun throwing the ball over the field. Why? Because the Buccaneers brought in the quarterback fixer. That's what Dave Canales was considered at the time. And he fixed Baker. He fixed Baker so well, the Bucs are still reaping the rewards of him, as they'd win the division the following year as well, and are still in contention to win the division this year against the Panthers. They just need some breaks to go their way. But Dave Canales set all that in motion because he knows what he's doing as offense coach. So, the Carolina Panthers had a struggling first overall pick who needed help. He needed a fixer. So they brought in the quarterback fixer, Dave Canales. I know what you're thinking. You're hyping up Dave Canales. Well, his first year, he went 5-12. Why are you talking so glowingly about him? Well, we'll get to that in a second. But it's important to talk about with what happened at the start of the season with Bryce Young. And that's, the Panthers were still horrible beyond belief, as he was benched after the second week of the season for Andy Dalton. But Young was brought back in week 8. And following week 8, something looked different with the Carolina Panthers. Now, they would lose that game in Denver. But from that stretch on, they won 5 games. And they lost 5 games. They were a 500 team. And those losses were pretty close. They lost by 3 points to the Chiefs, 3 points to the Bucs in overtime, 6 points to the Eagles, in which they nearly drove down to take the lead late. They did get blown out a little bit by the Cowboys, 14-30, but then they beat the Cardinals, got a whooping by the Bucs, but then ended the season with an overtime win over the Atlanta Falcons. There was some hope in Carolina. Maybe they wouldn't be contending for the division the following year, but they looked like a professionally ran organization, a professionally ran team. There was hope in Carolina that Dave Canales figured out how to work with Bryce Young, because Bryce Young started to look like an NFL quarterback. Now, he maybe wasn't elite, but he was good. He was winning games. He wasn't making the same mistakes. He wasn't taking unnecessary hits. He was playing smarter. He was playing loose, something we hadn't seen from him at that point. And that's the key. Bryce Young got some confidence because Dave Canales knew what to do. He knew how to fix the team. He knew how to, be the quarterback fixer. And now we look at the Panthers this year with some hope, some optimism. But we have to talk about their offseason and one big-time move they made that I think really set this all in motion. The drafting of Tedora McMillan. Now, why do I think that was such a major move? Well, it gave Bryce Young something he hasn't had in the NFL. A true cut number 1 receiver. I wasn't like a lot of people during the draft process. A lot of people were much lower on him. I always remembered watching those Arizona games and thinking, this dude has it all, and he will be that guy at the NFL level. So I didn't back down. And during the draft process, I started mocking him to Carolina every single mock I did. Why? Because it made sense. Tedora McMillan is a giant receiver, and he played with a small quarterback that couldn't see over the line of scrimmage, something that Bryce Young struggles with because he is so short in stature. Well, what do you need with a short quarterback? You need a tall guy that can go up and make a great catch, a guy that can beat people in man-to-man, and a guy that's easier to see because he's so tall. Tet has that ability, and we look at how he's played throughout this season. As McMillan has a chance to go for 1,000 yards this season, his rookie season, he already has 66 catches, he's over 900 yards, and he's got 7 receiving touchdowns. He's been phenomenal for the Panthers this year, and in my opinion, a big reason as to why they're having such great success. And the Panthers have had a weird season. As they started out 0-2, then whooped the Falcons. They beat the Cowboys, who we didn't think they would beat at the time. They beat the Packers, which at that moment, it was shocking. Everyone was like, the Packers just lost to the Panthers? What? Then they beat the Falcons again with Bryce Young looking like the guy we all thought he would be when he was drafted. And they beat the Rams. The team we all at that thought process was considering, hey, they might be the Super Bowl winner. They went to Carolina, they lost. And they beat the Bucs most importantly. Now, this all comes down to tomorrow. Will they beat the Buccaneers? Will they win the division? And even if they don't necessarily win tomorrow, they still have a chance that the Falcons win. But let's be realistic here. You don't want to get in because the Falcons won. You want the Panthers to get in from beating the Bucs, from getting to 9-8 after years of torture seasons, of lost seasons, through the end of Ron Rivera, through the Matt Rhule era, through the 11 games of Frank Reich, through all the issues of Dave Tepper having with the fan base, all of that amounting to one game that the Panthers can take for themselves. This isn't them needing to rely on anyone. They win, they get in. That's end of story. And I think we are all really overlooking this team. I look at the Panthers right now. They get in the playoffs. They're that 4th seed. You got to go to Carolina. You got to go to an environment that is hungry to see their team play in the playoffs. Do you know when the last time was the Carolina Panthers had a home playoff game? Do you? Because it's going to shock you, I bet. That would be 2015. They have not had a home playoff game since the year they went to the Super Bowl. That's how long it's been. Are you telling me that fan base wouldn't be amazing? That they wouldn't be rowdy throughout the entire day? And whoever comes in there is going to have to deal with a fight. Because the Panthers have beaten some good teams this year. They beat the Rams. They beat the Packers when they were healthy. They're not afraid of any team that's going to come in. It doesn't matter if it's the Seahawks. They played a close game against Seattle last week. Now, Seahawks did pull away a bit, but you watched the majority of that game. It was relatively close. They took it to San Francisco in San Francisco. Some stuff happened, yeah, but Brock Purdy had one of the worst games of his career. We look at that as a possible option. Maybe the Panthers win that. Or they get the Rams again. A team they've already beaten. A team that they have the confidence to beat again. No matter how we look at it, if the Panthers are in the playoffs, some teams should be worried. Thank you very much for watching this video, and this is going up the day before the Panthers play the Bucs to win the NFC South. I had a great time making this video. I had a great time going back memory lane, rewatching some of these games, looking at a lot of these stats, remembering what I thought of certain moves the Panthers made at the time. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, I'd appreciate if you hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you'd share this, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm trying to hit 500 subscribers, and I just really would like to hit that. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you all had a great time, and have a great day, everyone.